What's going on, guys? So in front of you, you were looking at two pretty phenomenal products from the folks over at Geny Hitches. Now, these are products that a lot of people probably own, and there could be some confusion as to why one exists when you could kind of use the other one. So let's talk about these. Hang tight, I'll be right back. So first of all, big shout out to the folks over at Geny for supporting this content. Also, my channel sponsor, eTrailer.com, who actually carries all of the Geny products. So if you're looking for a new hitch and you're looking for arguably the baddest of the baddest hitches out there, Geny makes them, has the most phenomenal finish on them ever. And yeah, they're super strong and they do a bunch of different things, and you can add a bunch of different accessories to them. That said, why are you looking at two hitches that, I guess from the surface, kind of like makes sense if you're looking at them purely from a common sense perspective, but probably have a function that might surprise you? So on top here, you're looking at the Geny Mega Hitch offset version. Below, you're looking at the Geny Mega Hitch traditional version, I guess is what I'll call it. Why would you want an offset hitch versus just a traditional hitch? So I know a lot of people will probably just assume that, well, this gives you 4 receiver openings instead of 3, and you may need that 4th one for additional height. But the real reason for why this product exists is actually a little surprising and possibly a little different than what you thought. So whenever you're towing super heavy pintle trailers, and what I mean by pintle trailers are trailers that instead of a conventional coupler have a lannette ring or a pintle ring, these things can get insanely heavy, and typically you're going to see these on very, very large utility trailers, very, very large dump trailers that have a tremendous amount of tongue weight. Not all the time. You'll actually see some of these on lighter weight trailers. I've made videos talking about the fact that this isn't always something you're going to see on like a 20,000 pound conventional trailer, but where you see them a lot is when you're looking at city and fleet vehicles that are hauling skid steers, excavators, things like that behind a dump truck. And you see a lot of them behind fleet vehicles like 350 dually pickup trucks, Ram 3500s, a lot of construction vehicles that are also hauling heavy equipment. Well, again, why? The reason for that is because the connection is usually higher and you still need to be able to lock the hitch in place. Now, the benefit of this is the fact that these hitches are crazy heavy, like 60 plus pounds. So what can happen is, let's say that this is the hitch we have in place. And traditionally, I haul around trailers that have traditional 2 5/16 inch ball couplers on them. And I have the hitch ball in the lowest or the second to lowest connection point. Well, I can simply hitch and go. But then when it comes time for me to hitch up to a trailer that is heavier, that uses a pintle ring, and it's much higher, I have to remove this entire assembly, and in some cases I have to loosen an anti-rattle sleeve, something that goes here that's bolted in place, just to flip the hitch so I can get it high enough to utilize the pintle ring or the lannette ring. Now, this is an area of convenience more than anything. The process of flipping this around for any normal hitch is pretty simple, right? You simply unpin it, flip it around, put it back in. But when you're dealing with 60 plus pounds of weight that you have to flip around, on top of that, possibly an anti-rattle device you have to unbolt before you can flip it around, get it all back into place. This is where the convenience factor for folks who tow a lot of trailers like that really, really comes into play with a hitch like this. The fact is, this is already set up at a higher height with the ability for you to put the lannette ring lock or the pintle lock in place and secure your pintle. Now, the minute I need to switch from this back to a 2 5/16 inch coupler that's going to sit much lower, I simply pop this bottom pin out, throw it in here. I can even leave this out because it's unlikely to contact anything. So yeah, I simply pull the ball out, move it to the receiver slot that I need, and I'm ready to go. It's a very, very simple, quick process. And what I've learned about Geny over the years, because if you followed my channel for a while, you'll know that early on I was a little questionable on the reality of why somebody would need a Geny hitch with all these receivers. And then secondly, I was a little leery on how far they stuck off the back of the vehicle. But because they really have convenience features built into them and they were purely designed around function, the founder of Geny only built the very first Geny hitch because he owned a company that needed a certain type of hitch to work well with his application. And I can imagine having multiple receivers to where I have accessories, I have things that I can put into them, really came in handy. And to be able to quickly lower the ball, to be able to quickly switch to a pintle or a lannette ring, to be able to quickly put in a clevis mount or a shackle mount, probably made a lot of sense. That's why Gen Y has grown so quickly and become a powerhouse in the hitch industry. But that said, it's a brilliant idea. Again, if one day I'm hauling a utility trailer with a standard 2 5/16 inch coupler, well, I'm just going to put the ball at its lowest mount. But then I might need to go pick up a utility trailer with a Lynette ring or a pintle ring, and I need to raise it to its highest mount without having to unpin it, loosen my anti-rattle device, pull out a 60-pound hitch, flip it back in, put all that stuff back in, and then change it back around again once I switch to a different trailer. I think people who tow a lot of trailers understand that it's inconveniencing anytime you have to deal with your hitch. It's always nice just to have your hitch in place, and if you do have to deal with it, it's nice to have the most convenience built into it, because you just want to hitch and go. You don't want any part of that time struggling to get your hitch set up to hitch and go. So I can really appreciate this design. This specific one has a 3-inch shank, which is directly compatible with certain Super Duty models that have a 3-inch receiver, but they also have this in a 2.5-inch shank and a 2-inch shank. Now the 2.5-inch and 3-inch shank version all can be rated at the highest capacity that they offer these in, which is 32,000 pounds worth of towing capacity and 3,500 pounds worth of tongue weight capacity, which is absolutely insane on the back of a traditional Class 3 pickup truck. So there's very, very few vehicles out there that can handle that much tongue weight and that much towing weight from a conventional hitch. Gen Y is definitely one of them. And actually, when I first had an opportunity to drive the 2023 Super Duty, it was an F450 that was hitched up to 30,000 pounds worth of weight on the back of a trailer at the Detroit Proving Grounds for Ford. And get this, it had a Gen Y hitch on it with a pintle, with the thing set up reversed, that flipped over so it could support the pintle. So when the folks at Gen Y said, well, this is the reason why we made this offset hitch the way it is, was to support the pintle without having to flip the hitch over, I instantly was able to recollect back in my mind. And if you go back to that video, which I might actually overlay it here, but if you go back to that video, you'll actually see they flipped the hitch over so it could support the pintle. And again, if they needed to use that truck to tow a different type of trailer that sat lower, they'd have to pull the whole thing back out, flip it back around, move the ball, pin it back in place. And again, if you have an anti-rattle in place, you got to bolt all that back in place to make it work. So I get it. This is really cool. It is super convenient. And again, it's all built around the fact that the folks over at Gen Y are trying to come up with really innovative ways of making the process of hitching an afterthought. So it doesn't have to be such a time-consuming, tedious process to make little changes. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you enjoyed this relatively short video kind of talking to you about why the offset hitch, why it's designed the way it is, the convenience factor of simply having one more receiver tube stacked up slightly higher. It really doesn't take up any more space back here. It doesn't interfere with anything going on back here. And quite frankly, it looks even cooler and even more massive than the one that doesn't have it. So that's always a cool factor. Plus the fact that you can get this with all 3 major shank sizes that you might need for a pickup truck. That's really cool as well. And the fact that you can get it in a 2.5-inch shank that equals the capacity of the 3-inch shank. Again, only Gen Y and maybe a few handful of manufacturers of hitches give you that option. Most of them, as much as I love B&W, as much as I love WaySafe, you have to move to the 3-inch version with the Super Duty only to get the maximum towing capacity and maximum hitch weight capacity out of their products. So just keep that in mind. Anyways, guys, I sure hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to the channel, give me a thumbs up, and we will talk to you again very soon.